He goes back to an Irish seaside, sort of a vacation community at the seaside that he visited for an extremely important and memorable summer vacation in his youth. So it really is more of a piece of memory and character and how the past and the present kind of collide, and the things that he experienced as a child collide with the grief that he's going through as an adult. What happens, the basic bare bones of the plot are that when he was a child, he spent this sort of not very innocent summer at a small cottage. His family was not very wealthy. They stayed in a little cottage, and down the road was a family known, interestingly, appropriately as the Graces, who was a very well-to-do family with twin children, a brother and sister. And he becomes drawn to them, and they're drawn to him. He's also drawn to their sort of incandescent mother, and there's a whole bunch of things that go on in this very memorable childhood experience of his. And now, as an adult, he's going back to that same seaside community, and he's staying in the house that the Graces stayed in, which has since become a bed and breakfast. So all of the past and the present is colliding in this place, and he's dealing with all of these emotions. There's not a lot of plot, although there are a few interesting twists that I won't hint at, because things that happened in his past do kind of come together, and he has to come to grips with that. I think a lot of the movement in the book comes, it's not a very fast-paced book, but it's sort of slow and relentless, like the ocean. Just wave after wave of emotion keeps coming back, and it alternates between the past and the present, and you can just see how he's caught between the two. His daughter is also, his adult daughter is involved because she has plenty of issues of her own, so that's also brought into the mix. So it's really a work of character more than plot.
So that's who you would recommend to people, why people should read it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of person who would like this book is someone who really wants a chewy literary read. I love collecting literary sentences, and this book is full of them. There's just so many places where you stop and you have to reread what he wrote because the language is just so exquisite. And I think it's the kind of book that, as you're reading it, you enjoy that, but it's not until several days after you've put it down that bits of it come back to you. Films can be sometimes the same way, where it doesn't have a tremendous impact on you right away, but later on little bits keep coming back.
It lives with you, the story lives with you.
Yeah, very much so, the atmosphere,
the best kind,
I think.
definitely.
So yeah, so I again, that's The Sea by John Banville. And again, don't forget the books he writes under a pseudonym if you want to try a slightly different perspective. So Beth, what's your theme this year, and how did you end up
My
choosing
theme
it?
is frustration. I get very frustrated when movies are going to come out before I've read the book. I want them to wait until I've read it so I can have the reading experience, and from then maybe decide whether I want to see the movie or not. So I want to say, wait until I've read it. So I'm going to alert you to a couple of upcoming movies, too, and then I'm going to talk about read-alikes for each of those movies. So
what's the first one?
So the first movie is The Light Between Oceans. It's going to come out on September 2nd, and it's based on M.L. Stedman's book of the same title. It's going to star Michael Fassbender and
A good reason to see any movie.
Yes, but also Alicia Vikander, who was in
The Danish Girl.
The Danish Girl.
She's superb.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful book. It's a lyrical book, and it has wonderful descriptions of the life of a lighthouse keeper and his wife on an isolated island off the coast of Australia. And it takes place just after World War I, with complex, vivid characters that struggle with life, loss, and the all-encompassing love of a child.
So I know it has a lighthouse in it. Is there anything else that's similar between that and the Stedman book?
Well, they both take place in Australia, and The Light Between Oceans takes place on the southwestern corner of Australia, and The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, which is the book I'm really going to talk about, takes place on the southeastern corner off of Tasmania. And they both have lighthouses. They both are about people living in isolation in Australia. And they're both about people with troubling moral dilemmas. And the other books on the list also have those things in common.
Are there differences?
There are differences. Again, they both take place in Australia. But the tone of the books, the tone of the books is pretty similar. They're both about the desolation, but this one has some parts about the wife's youth, and it has, they both have multiple viewpoints, although this one also has some of the son's point of view, whereas the other one just has the wives and the husbands. There's also, this one doesn't have the gut-wrenching moral dilemma of Light Between Oceans, but the characters are well developed and they carry you through. And you want them to be okay, to grow, and they do grow. So that's The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife by Karen Viggers. So Jackie, for your theme, what did you choose this year?
I chose cop fiction, and not just any cop fiction. I'm not thinking like Harry Bosch, Michael Connelly, which nothing wrong with him, but he's often, and I think he created the stereotype of this sort of hard-nosed, divorced, rough around the edges detective. I'm going in a little bit of a different direction for most of these, and I'm looking for books that kind of go beyond the police stereotypes. And my theme was actually inspired by my first book, which is Inside the O'Briens by Lisa Genova. She's best known for Still Alice, which was made into a movie with Julianne Moore. That book is about Alzheimer's disease, and this one is, the focus is Huntington's disease, which if you don't know anything about, which I didn't when I read it, it's horrific. It's ravaging, it's hereditary, there's no cure. Once you've got it, and that's sort of, you have to prepare yourself for the worst. The story follows the family, the O'Briens, as they sort of come to terms with the realities of the disease and what it means for their family, the long-term effects, how they're going to get through this and where they're going to go from here. But for me, it really wasn't about the plot, it was about the details.
And how does Genova make the details come alive?
If you read for character and place, which I do, this book is for you. The story is set in Boston's Charlestown neighborhood, and the main character, Joe O'Brien, is a Boston police officer. So I live in Charlestown, and my husband's a Boston police officer. We, in typical towny fashion, we live in the house my husband grew up in, my in-laws live next door, and everyone is Irish Catholic. So it's very, very similar. Suffice it to say, I was prepared to pick this book apart.
I could see that.
For inaccuracies. As you all know, I am very particular about the way authors handle Boston. It's often done poorly, which upsets me. And I can say with literally no reservations that she nailed it, right down to describing, the benches in the park where I walk my dog. I mean, it's perfect.
So what about the cop part of the story inspired your theme?
So the reason I chose this for my first title and is because of the way she handled these cop characters. She was so good. My husband actually works with the cop that she consulted with, and he said that she was meticulous. She wanted to know everything. Incidentally, she also, when we conveyed to him that we liked the book, she got us a signed copy.
Oh.
Very nice.
Which is very classy.
Very nice.
But she really did her homework. Cops have a certain way of talking, a lot of lingo, there's a lot of codes. When you just listening to them, sometimes you don't know what they're saying. She got everything right. And even the things, I had heard a lot of it just being around him and his partner. And the things I didn't know, I checked with him, and he said, no, that's exactly how we would say it. She gets everything right. She captures how doing a detail, even if it's outside Fenway, is unbelievably boring. You don't actually get to watch the game, and mostly your feet just hurt. But the relationships between the officers she captured really well. Sometimes it's like a spouse, sometimes it's like a sibling, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a colleague. I will say the only thing that she didn't capture perfectly is the swearing. She toned down the swearing a lot. They swear way more than she does in the book. But she really takes the Boston Irish cop stereotype and makes him into a real person that I felt like I knew because I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I'm the same way you are about character. Character's really important to me, that's kind of why this appeals to me. But what about what actually happens? What
I know,
and with the family and the disease and everything?
I'm glossing over the plot here a lot
Yeah.
because I feel like the story shines more for its details. But there is a story. I mean, the plot is by no means thin or uninteresting. On the contrary, it's really, she does a beautiful job taking this family through this trajectory of diagnosis to acceptance in a very realistic way. It's just that in between all that, she's getting all these details right and making these people so real that you kind of don't need to know how it ends. It's a lot of just acceptance. But in any case, I really, in all aspects, I strongly recommend this book. This was Inside the O'Briens by Lisa Genova. I've
Great.
gone on much too long. Leanne.
Not at all, Jackie.
Go
Not at all. Not a problem. The list, I have two lists this year. The first one I'm going to talk about is called Stunning Stories, and it's a hodgepodge of themes and subjects and writing styles. But what I think what binds them together is character, which is what I primarily read for when I'm reading for pleasure. And the book I'm going to do is The Improbability of Love by Hannah Rothschild, which is an irresistible blend of art, mystery, and intrigue along the lines of Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch. I do see some analogies to that. Hannah Rothschild is a first-time author, and she's also the first woman to chair the London's National Gallery, so she knows her art. She creates this dazzling, omniscient narrator who is capable, who gives voice to an irresistible cast of rascals and heroes. She also includes a very colorful and conniving art world players who make all sorts of trouble for our heroine, and a very persistent suitor, plus a 300-year-old long-lost masterpiece.
So those are the characters.
Pretty much.
What else did you choose? Why else did you choose this?
I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. So, the fact
know
that a
that.
We do know
person,
that.
yeah, well, you know how I am with crafts. We won't go into that now. But the fact that a person can capture a moment in time and render it so luminously astounds me. It always has. It absolutely makes me crazy. So stories about art and how to create anything like that, and how it affects its creator and the people who appreciate the art alike, they fascinate me. And you combine this with my love of art capers and crime capers, and this was irresistible to me. I had to pick it up right away. The thematic material was pretty interesting to me. I mean, the fact that art, the embodiment of beauty, and humanity's highest aspirations for the most part, also makes people, it arouses appalling dimensions of evil. So the paradox of those two things is something that this author does extremely well. She also brings in a little things like the modern exploitation of women. That's another thematic arc, as well as the moral quandaries of war. But these dark themes really are tied together well, and they blend with the incredible, captivating story of Annie McD, who is our heroine here. She's a young woman of very small means and boundless passion for history and food. She's trying to mend a blasted heart. She's had a terrible love affair. She's coping with her alcoholic mother, who is such an incredible character in her own right, and she wants to succeed in London as a chef. So she goes into this little shop, and she's actually going to buy this for somebody else, and it turns out that doesn't work out too well. So she finds this grimy, yet very seductive old painting, and it turns out to be an 18th century masterpiece by Antoine Watteau. And she innocently sets off on an art world upheaval. I mean, this small thing just is like a domino effect throughout the entire book. And what this author does really well is something I thought was very innovative. She gives the title painting its own point of view chapters. And she does it without making it too precious. That could get cute really
Yeah,
fast.